I hadn't seen Nate in 6 years. Not since high school graduation, when we hugged goodbye on the football field, sweaty and teary-eyed, promising to keep in touch. Spoiler alert, we didn't. Life happened. College, jobs, different cities. I chased design internships up the coast. He enlisted in the Air Force and vanished into a life of rigid discipline I couldn't begin to understand. Then last month, out of nowhere, I got a DM from him. "Yo, you still in San Diego?" I stared at the message longer than I'd like to admit. It was simple, casual, but my stomach flipped the way it used to when his name lit up my phone back in the day. We messaged back and forth, catching up in a weirdly easy, natural way. By the end of the convo, we had plans to grab beers. I played it off like it was no big deal, but I cleaned my entire apartment even though he wasn't coming over. Changed my shirt twice, checked my reflection way too many times. I don't know why I was nervous. Maybe it was because Nate was the guy, the one who once shared a tent with me on a high school camping trip and casually laid his head on my shoulder like it was the most normal thing in the world. The one who danced with a girl at prom while I stood on the sidelines pretending not to care. The one I might have, possibly, definitely, had a massive crush on. He was the one who got away, except I never had him in the first place. I got to the bar first. Divey, dim, sticky floors. Same one we used to sneak into with fake IDs. I sat in a booth at the back, bouncing my leg under the table, watching the door. Then he walked in. Nate looked unreal. Same sharp jawline, same hazel eyes, but he'd filled out in a way that made me feel suddenly very underdressed. Black t-shirt that hugged his chest, short cropped hair, confident stride. He smiled when he saw me, and I felt the air rush out of my lungs. "Cam," he said, and his voice was deeper now, steadier, like gravel and comfort. "Nate," I said back, standing as we hugged. He smelled like cedar and something clean. His hand clapped my back the way it always used to. "You look good," he said. "You look different." I laughed nervously. He smirked. "Lot changes in 6 years." We ordered beers and talked like no time had passed. He told me about sleeping in tents overseas, missing real coffee, what it was like flying in a cargo plane during a sandstorm. I told him about my roommate from hell, my design portfolio, my therapist. The conversation flowed. Somewhere along the way, his knee bumped mine under the table, and he didn't move it. My chest tightened. So I asked, trying to keep it light, "You still into girls?" He chuckled. "I don't know. Maybe not just girls." I blinked. "Wait, seriously?" He shrugged, looking down at his beer. "Been thinking a lot lately. About who I am. What I want. I guess I'm still figuring it out." I didn't say anything for a second. Just stared at him, wondering if I was dreaming. When we finally left the bar, it was past midnight. The sidewalk was quiet, bathed in that weird yellow streetlight glow. I figured we'd say a quick goodbye, maybe hug again. Then he asked, "You got plans tonight?" I shook my head. "My hotel's around the corner," he said. Not a question, not even really a suggestion. Just there. I hesitated, then nodded. He led the way. The room was small, cold with AC, neat in that temporary, impersonal hotel way. One bed. He swiped the key card and stepped aside to let me in. I walked in. The door clicked shut behind us, and then he turned to me, serious all of a sudden. "Cam, if this is a bad idea, say so now." I looked at him. At the guy the first hadn't seen in 6 years. The guy the first used to dream about. And I said, "It's not." He didn't move at first. Neither did I. We just stood there, the silence between us stretching thick with whatever it was we weren't saying. The dim hotel lighting made his eyes look darker, more serious. He wasn't grinning now. His jaw was tense, shoulders stiff, like he was waiting for a green light. I gave it to him, not with words, but with the way I stepped forward. Just close enough, and that's when it happened. His hand came up slowly, like he was afraid to spook me. He touched my cheek. Barely a graze at first, then firmer. His thumb moved along my jawline, and I felt my breath catch. "You sure?" he asked again, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." That was all it took. He kissed me. It wasn't frantic or aggressive. It was steady, warm, like he'd been thinking about it for a long time, like he didn't want to mess it up. I leaned into it, hands gripping his sides, feeling the heat under his shirt, the tautness of his stomach. I'd imagined this more times than I'd ever admit, but this was different. Realer. Slower. More grounded. We stumbled toward the bed, not breaking contact. His mouth moved against mine with a hunger that wasn't rushed, just deep. Focused. When he finally pulled back, both of us breathless, his forehead rested against mine. "I've thought about this," he said, so quiet it was almost just a vibration between us. Back then, after prom, I didn't get it. But now, my fingers curled into the hem of his shirt. "You get it now?" He nodded once. Then I pulled his shirt up and off, tossing it to the side. I let my hands explore. The muscle across his chest, the scar on his side he never used to talk about. He was warmer than I expected, solid and grounding. I could have stayed like that all night. He helped me out of my hoodie, laughing softly when it got stuck over my head. Then his hands were on my sides, my back, tracing every inch like he needed to memorize it. It was slow. That surprised me. It wasn't like either of us hadn't had hookups before. But this, it wasn't about getting off. It was about something else. He kissed my shoulder, my collarbone, my neck. I didn't realize I was trembling until he whispered, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just been wanting this for a long time." His arms wrapped around me tighter. We laid back onto the bed, not bothering to get under the covers. Just skin against skin, heat pressing in from all sides. His weight settled beside me, one hand resting on my chest, thumb moving in slow circles. The TV across the room played some muted late-night infomercial, forgotten. For a while, we didn't say anything. Then, in the quiet, he said, "You remember that camping trip senior year? Yosemite?" I laughed softly. "Yeah, you fell asleep on my shoulder and drooled on my hoodie." He grinned against my neck. "You didn't move. I remember that." "Of course I didn't," I said, brushing his hair back. "That was the closest I'd gotten to touching you without it being weird." He didn't say anything for a beat. Then, wasn't weird. I looked at him. "You think I didn't notice the way you looked at me back then?" he asked. I did. I just didn't know what it meant. For either of us. "And now?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "Now I'm lying in bed with you, wondering why the hell I waited this long." That hit me harder than I expected. Because I'd been wondering the same thing for years. We stayed like that until the sky outside started turning faintly gray. I thought maybe he'd fall asleep first. Maybe I would. But neither of us did. Too much was happening. Internally. Emotionally. It wasn't about lust anymore. It felt like waking up after a long, long sleep. When I woke up, he was still there. Pressed up against me, arm heavy across my stomach, breathing slow and steady. The curtains were mostly shut, so the room was still dim, but a pale gray light was starting to creep around the edges. For a second, I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling, heart thudding. Not in panic, but in that weird, surreal way when something huge has happened and your brain hasn't caught up yet. Nate was warm. His skin against mine. His leg tangled with mine under the sheet. It wasn't a dream. I turned slightly and watched him sleep. His face looked softer like this, relaxed. No bravado. No tension. His lashes were longer than I remembered. He'd always had that kind of face, handsome without trying, dangerous without realizing. I could have stayed there forever, but eventually I shifted. Gently, so I wouldn't wake him, I slipped out of bed and padded to the bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror. My hair was a mess, my lips looked swollen, and my chest still tingled where he'd kissed me. What the hell just happened? I splashed water on my face and tried to center myself. There were 1,000 thoughts crashing around in my head, and none of them had anywhere to land. When I came out, Nate was sitting up. He rubbed his eyes, shirtless, sheet pooled around his waist. Our eyes met, and for a second, I didn't know what to say. But he beat me to it. "Hey," he said, voice raspy from sleep. "You okay?" "Yeah," I nodded quickly. "Just needed to pee." "Right," he said, running a hand through his hair. Then, after a beat, "That wasn't just me, right?" "No," I said. "Definitely not just you." He smiled. Small, nervous. "Okay, good." We sat in that weird morning after silence for a minute. Not awkward exactly, just tentative. I grabbed my shirt off the chair and pulled it over my head. "So what now?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He leaned back against the headboard, eyes on me. "I don't know." "You always this decisive in the military?" That made him snort. "They don't train you for this shit." He swung his legs over the side of the bed and reached for his phone. Checked the time. Damn. I gotta check out in like 30 minutes. Right. I felt something tight in my chest. I didn't want this to be the part where it got weird, where he left and we both pretended nothing happened. He stood, pulling on his jeans. "You hungry?" I blinked. "What?" "Let's grab breakfast or something. I know a spot." "You want breakfast?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah," he shrugged. "Unless you're trying to ghost me." I laughed, relief flooding my chest. "I was gonna say the same to you." 15 minutes later, we were sitting at a hole-in-the-wall diner across the street, both of us looking like we hadn't slept, sipping burnt coffee out of cracked mugs. We didn't talk about what happened the night before. Not directly. He asked me about work. I asked him about where he was stationed last. We talked about mutual friends we hadn't seen since high school. But every now and then, he'd look at me with this softness, like we were both aware of something sitting just under the surface. Something real. When the check came, he grabbed it before I could. "I got this," he said. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said firmly. Then after a pause, "And I want to see you again." I stared at him. "For real," he added. "Not just a one-night thing. If you're good with that." I nodded, heart skipping. "Yeah, I'm good with that," he grinned. That same easy, crooked grin he used to flash at me back when we were 18, and I thought he'd never look at me that way. But he was, and it was just the beginning. We didn't fall into something official overnight. That's not how it worked with Nate. At first, it was just hanging out. We grabbed dinner. We watched movies at my place. I helped him look for short-term rentals around town while he figured out his next step post-military. But the space between those moments, that's where things started shifting. He'd text me late at night. "You up?" Sometimes he'd just say, "Mind if I crash?" And I always said yes. The first time he showed up with nothing but a hoodie and gym shorts, I offered him a spare blanket. He just looked at me and said, "That a hint?" Then he climbed into my bed without waiting for an answer. We didn't always hook up. Sometimes he'd just fall asleep with his arm draped over me, our legs tangled like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes we'd talk in the dark, about stupid high school memories, about the friends who drifted away, about how different we'd both become. I didn't know how to be back, he told me one night. Like, in normal life, everything felt fake after deployment. Quiet. Empty. I remember tracing his arm with my fingers, feeling the tension under his skin. You don't have to figure it out alone, you know. He didn't say anything. But he kissed me like he understood. Still, we didn't talk about what this was. Not yet. There was a kind of unspoken rule between us. No labels, no pressure. Just whatever this was. Whatever it was becoming. One night, I had a freelance deadline that kept me glued to my desk until 3 a.m. I figured Nate would have gone home, but when I finally crawled into bed, he was already there, snoring softly, one arm outstretched like he'd been waiting for me. I slid in beside him, careful not to wake him, but he stirred, shifted, and pulled me into him without opening his eyes. "I missed you today," he murmured, voice thick with sleep. My heart clenched. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The first time things got complicated was when my roommate, Dave, came home early from a weekend trip. He walked into the apartment, took one look at Nate barefoot in my kitchen, scrambling eggs in nothing but mesh shorts, and raised his eyebrows. "Friend of yours?" "Yeah," I said, a little too quickly. "Nate, from high school." Dave smirked. "Ah, the very close kind of friend." Nate glanced over his shoulder and just nodded. "You want eggs?" Dave laughed and disappeared into his room. That night, after Dave had gone out again, Nate was quiet. We were lying on the couch, his head on my chest, my fingers in his hair. "You okay?" I asked. He hesitated. "You ever feel like people are watching, waiting for you to define everything?" I nodded. "All the time." He looked up at me. "You think we have to?" I thought about it, about what it meant to be his, about how many years I'd spent pretending I didn't want exactly this, about how different it felt now that I had it. "I don't care what they call it," I said, "as long as I don't have to stop." His eyes softened. "Me neither." But of course, it didn't stay that simple. Because the more time we spent together, the more I started to want. Not just the nights and the kisses and the way he'd make coffee in the mornings, like he lived there. I wanted all of him. And I had no idea if he wanted that back. There was this moment, probably when I should have known. We were at the beach, one of those rare San Diego days where the sky wasn't blinding blue, but soft and overcast. Nate had insisted we get out, grab tacos, and just exist like normal people, his words. We sat on the sand, watching the water roll in and out, greasy foil wrappers piled between us. A group of college kids played frisbee nearby. Some little kid was crying over a broken sandcastle. Everything felt easy, simple. Then Nate leaned back on his elbows, looked over at me and said, "You ever think about what it'd be like if we'd figured this out sooner?" I blinked, thrown. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, "if I hadn't joined the military, if you hadn't moved, if we had whatever this is back then." I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to sound bitter, but the truth was, I'd thought about it. A lot. I used to imagine an alternate version of senior year where I told him how I felt, where we kissed behind the gym, where we went to prom together, where I didn't have to pretend. "I think we weren't ready," I said finally. "I mean, I was barely out to myself. You were chasing something you needed." He nodded slowly, eyes back on the ocean. "Yeah, I was running. Maybe still am." We didn't talk much after that. Just sat there, the waves filling the silence. That night, he didn't come over. Said he needed space. Said he was tired. I said okay, but I didn't sleep. The next day, he texted me around noon. "Sorry for going quiet. Want to grab a drink later?" I said yes because I always said yes. A week later, I came home to find one of his shirts still on my bed. It smelled like him. That clean, woodsy scent I could never describe but always noticed. I picked it up and held it for a second longer than I should have, and that's when it hit me. I was already in too deep. I told myself not to fall, but I was already gone. The first crack came on a Thursday night. He'd had a rough day. Some paperwork mess with the VA, an old friend ghosting him, something about not being able to sleep. He showed up at my apartment with takeout and beer, and that look he got when he was spiraling but wouldn't admit it. We watched reruns in silence, barely touched the food. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Do you think this is a phase?" My stomach dropped. "What?" "This," he said, motioning between us. "What we're doing. Us." I sat up a little straighter. "Do you?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at the dark screen like it had the answers. "I've never done this before," he muttered. "Been with a guy. Had feelings like this. It scares the shit out of me." I swallowed hard. "You think it doesn't scare me too?" He looked at me then. Really looked. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly. I nodded. Then don't. We didn't talk for a long time after that. Just leaned against each other in the dark, the space between us suddenly filled with 100 unsaid things. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. Just a note on my pillow. Had to clear my head. I'll text you. But he didn't. Not for 2 days. And in those 48 hours, I spiraled. Had I misread everything? Was it just sleepover? Was he about to disappear again, just like after high school? I told myself not to be dramatic, but heartbreak doesn't care how logical you are. The silence from Nate stretched longer than it ever had. 2 days, then 3. By day 4, I stopped checking my phone every hour. I told myself I was done being someone's half-secret, done waiting for scraps of attention. But saying it out loud and feeling it in your chest? 2 very different things. I still missed him. The way he'd pull me close during movies, like it was automatic. The way his voice got soft in the morning, gravelly and sweet. Even the dumb little things. His toothbrush in my cup holder, the pair of socks he always forgot on my couch. It was ridiculous how much space he took up in my life, and how empty it felt now. Then Saturday night, just after midnight, there was a knock at my door. Not a text, not a call. A knock. I opened it, and there he was. Standing in the hallway, hoodie pulled up, hands in his pockets, eyes red like he hadn't slept. I just stared. You ghost me for 4 days and then show up like this? He looked down. Yeah, I deserve that. I didn't step aside. Not yet. What do you want, Nate? He was quiet for a second. Then his eyes met mine, and he said, I want to stop running. That broke something in me. Not in a painful way. In a relief so sharp it felt like breaking kind of way. I stepped back, let him in. He walked past me like he belonged there, like the 4 days hadn't happened, and sank into the couch like someone who had finally stopped holding his breath. I thought about what you said, he murmured, about not hurting you. I didn't sit down. Not yet. And I realized I've been hurting you by not saying anything, by not choosing this. Choosing you. I swallowed. My throat felt dry. And what changed? He looked up at me. That same fire in his eyes I used to see when we were kids, and he swore he'd make it out of our hometown. You did, he said. You changed me, and I'm terrified. But I'm done pretending like this doesn't mean something. Finally, I sat beside him. Our knees touched, like always. You're not the only one scared, I whispered. He nodded. But are you still in it? That was the question. The real one. I could have said something clever, something cautious, but instead, I leaned in and kissed him. Soft, slow, no fireworks. Just yes. After that, things didn't magically fix themselves. We didn't suddenly become boyfriends who held hands at brunch and posted selfies on rooftops. It was quieter than that. He started showing up more, left a second pair of running shoes by my door, bought an extra charger to keep at my place, started calling my apartment home when he was there. Sometimes, we'd still lie in bed in silence, both of us unsure how to talk about feelings without ruining the fragile, good thing we'd built. But slowly, we got better at it. And one night, as we lay tangled up in sheets and shadows, he whispered, I think I love you. I didn't say anything right away, just pressed my forehead to his. Then I whispered back, took you long enough. He smiled. And this time, he stayed. Months passed. We never had that dramatic, sit-down moment where we defined things. No, what are we? Talk over coffee, no anniversary countdown. It wasn't like that with Nate, but somehow he just became mine. Little things changed first. He started showing up with groceries, borrowing my hoodies without asking, leaving his keys on the hook by the door like it was his place too. The more we tried to keep it casual, the more obvious it became that we weren't. One night, we were brushing our teeth, separate sinks, one bathroom mirror, and he bumped my shoulder, grinning around the toothbrush like a kid. This is weird, he said, foamy-mouthed. "What is?" "This," he said, gesturing around the room. "Being here, waking up next to you. It's weird how normal it feels." I spit into the sink. "That's because it's not weird. It's real." He rinsed and looked at me in the mirror. "You know I've never had this, right?" "I know. And I suck at it." "You don't." He turned to face me then. "I want to be better at it." I paused. "At what?" He took a breath. "Loving you." I froze for a second. Not because I didn't feel the same. I did. God, I did. But hearing it from him, the guy who used to dodge every feeling with a joke or a shrug, meant more than I could explain. So I kissed him. Slow. Certain. And I whispered, "You already are." Sometimes I still catch myself looking at him like I used to in high school. Back then, it was all longing and silence, always watching from the edges of his life. But now he's in my kitchen in boxers and an old hoodie, frying eggs and singing off-key to a song from a playlist we made together. Now he's dragging me out of bed on Sunday mornings to go to the farmer's market, grumbling about overpriced sourdough but still buying it. Now he's reaching for my hand in public, not even thinking twice about it. It's not always perfect. Sometimes we argue over dumb things, like how he leaves wet towels on the floor, or how I always forget to close the cabinets. He still gets in his head some nights, staring off like he's back in a place I can't follow. And I still have to remind myself not to expect him to read my mind when I'm upset. But we keep showing up for each other. We keep choosing each other. That's the part one didn't expect. Not the intimacy, not the attraction, but the staying. The quiet, ordinary, wonderful staying. One night, months after that first text, I found him asleep on my couch, head tilted back, mouth slightly open, a book resting on his chest. The TV played softly in the background, some crime doc neither of us were really watching. I stood there for a second, watching him, thinking about all the nights I used to lie awake, imagining what it'd be like to touch him, to hold him, to hear him say my name like it meant something. And now he sleeps in my bed more than his own. Now he smiles when he sees me like he's home. We never said forever. We're not that kind of couple. But whatever this is, whatever we've built, it's ours. And it's real.